lines, sorting through the media bias, exposing the propaganda, and challenging you to use your brain. It's time to tap into the truth.
Yes, that's right, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed time to tap into the truth. Welcome to tonight's broadcast. Hope you are having a great day wherever you are, whatever you may be doing. And if you're pretty much anywhere throughout the United States at the moment, chances are it's pretty cold outside. So I hope you are bundled up and staying warm, or at the very least, staying safe if you can't stay indoors. Want to go ahead and jump right into things. There's some things to cover tonight, but the main story, the main topic that we'll be discussing a little bit later is new legislation that has been introduced in the state of Tennessee that is essentially designed to help to eliminate the NSA's ability to operate, at least utilizing any resources here in the state of Tennessee. Came across that today and thought it was well worth talking about. But while we're on the topic of the cold, as I briefly mentioned, and some of those unusual things going on, came across a story today over at the Foundry, which of course is part of the blog postings and news information provided by the Heritage Foundation over at heritage.org. And by the way, if you're not already a member of the Heritage Foundation, I would highly recommend you go over to heritage.org and take a look around and consider a membership. The Heritage Foundation does a great deal of work in assisting conservatives in having the intellectual firepower and the facts and the information needed to fight back and win in an argument and in a debate with the infamous liberal know-it-all. At any rate, the story I came across, I had actually heard a little bit about this before, and it had kind of blown by the radar, but as I came across the story again, I realized that this is something that we ought to be talking about just a little bit because of how ridiculous it is. Now, the article, as it was written by Mr. Evan Bernick, is titled "Drop the Cabbage, Bullwinkle." Evidently there's an Alaskan man, in case that sounded as slurred as it sounded to me, who's facing prison for the horrible and terrible crime of moose feeding. It's the world we live in. Now, the gentleman was on his own property. It was his cabbage to give away, and no one claims that he meant to do any harm to his amply antlered friends. But evidently, 67-year-old Samuel-Becker is indeed facing prison for giving visiting moose vegetables to munch on. Now, this has been reported at Fox News. This has been talked about over at the Daily Caller. I think there was even a mention of this over at theblaze.com. So you can find links to this other than just at the Heritage Foundation over at the Foundry. But at any rate, after receiving a tip last month that Becker had been feeding moose, Alaska State Troopers responded to the scene. Yes, there was cabbage on the ground. What a scene. And they claimed that Becker fed moose on the day of their visit. And so, Becker will have to appear in court on February the 3rd to face a misdemeanor charge of intentionally feeding game. He faces a fine of up to $10,000 and possibly up to a year in jail. Yeah. Possibly as much as a year behind bars for the horrible, heinous crime of leaving cabbage out for moose to eat. Now, enticing moose onto your property may not be the best of ideas. Moose are inherently dangerous animals. They are large, lumbering, they are territorial, and they're not accustomed to close contact with humans, and they tend to be spooked easily. Now, the spokeswoman for the Alaskan State Troopers, Megan Peters, in an effort to explain their side of the discussion when they were talking to a reporter for Fox News, said that even if they don't attack you, your presence around them could agitate them, and it could make it more dangerous for somebody else passing by that might not even know the moose is standing there. Now, it's reasonable to discourage people from getting too close to moose with civil fines, but I do think it's a little bit over the top to threaten anybody with jail time for putting out their own cabbage to feed the moose that they think could use a bit of a snack. Seriously, do we really think these are serious charges? Isn't the threat of heavy fines and jail an empty one? If only this were true. Because in 2010, retired Alaskan school teacher Charlie Vandersgraw was fined $20,000 after he pleaded guilty to charges of illegally feeding bears. Now, sure, it was stupid. Excuse me, but is it really a crime? Yeah, okay, just because the legislature passes a bill and makes it law saying that it's a crime, is it a crime to feed animals on your own property? It might be ill-advised, it may not be a bright idea, but is that really a crime? Should any municipality or county government or state government have the authority to criminalize your activity with wildlife on your own property? If the behavior was endangering somebody outside of yourself, then you might have an argument. But I tend to think that this is just nuts. Nobody else was being endangered. At any rate, supposedly in the name of protecting Mr. Becker from the consequences of his admittedly questionable decision, the state of Alaska is poised to inflict a far more grave injury. The continued existence of such criminal laws represents more of a threat to our livelihoods, reputation, and liberties than unruly moose. These criminal charges should be dropped as a matter should be resolved through the civil justice system. If you're determined to fine him for what you deem to be this criminal activity, this terrible behavior of feeding bullwinkle, then okay, charge the fines. But a year in jail? Seriously? I don't get it. I just don't. I don't understand why this is elevated to the point of jail time. Up to a year. Excuse me, but I don't see this as being something that's worthy of more than, $100, maybe $500 maximum as a fine. But we're talking about fines of possibly up to $20,000? It's just nuts. Meanwhile, speaking of the judicial system, also noteworthy news as of today, there was all kinds of legal wrangling around this case, so I found it very interesting that Texas went ahead and executed, that's right, the fast-tracking of the death penalty that Texas is notorious for, the wheels were kind of locked up on this one for a while. But Texas has executed the Mexican national who had been convicted of killing a police officer back in 1994. It's not very often that in Texas, if you go on to the death penalty, that you're hanging around for more than 4 or 5 years. They typically actually use their death penalty. They don't just have it, they do use it. I'm reminded of the comedy bit from Ron White, and in case you haven't seen it, it's like, not only do we have it, but we use it. It's a good bit. But what makes this interesting is the fact that the man was a Mexican national. Here illegally, of course. But what made the point even more interesting is that for the majority of this man's time in prison, the Mexican government has been trying to put pressure on the State Department, and in turn, the State Department has been trying to put pressure on Texas to not only revoke the death penalty, but to actually release him and send him back to Mexico. Now, all that, except of course for the ramifications of an international event, is pretty much a moot point now. It's over. It's done. The 46-year-old Edgar-Tamayo received a lethal injection this evening, Wednesday, January 22nd, for the fatal shooting of a 24-year-old officer by the name of Guy-gaddis. And like I mentioned before, that took place back in 1994, in January, actually. So, the guy has been waiting for his execution for some time. Now, I know even today there was a lot of last-minute, last-ditch efforts to try and work through the appeals process and try to get a stay of execution and all this other wonderful stuff that just didn't happen. The courts rejected the last day appeals, and Texas officials literally spurned arguments that Tamayo's conviction and death sentence were tainted because he didn't receive notice that he could request legal help from the Mexican consulate after his arrest for the officer slain. And attorneys also tried arguing, unsuccessfully I might add, that Tamayo was mentally impaired, which of course, even under the mean, nasty state laws in Texas, would have made him ineligible for execution. The lawyers also argued that this state's clemency procedures were unfair. Well, fair, unfair, plus, negative, minus, whatever your opinion on the deal. Bottom line here is Edgar-Tamayo has met Texas justice. He killed a police officer. He was convicted of that crime. And now the Mexican national has went to the other life. Passed on from this one into the next one. And I can't help but not feel too bad about it. What I do feel bad about, though, is the fact that the United States State Department felt it necessary, felt it appropriate to try and move forward with an effort to protect and save the life of this man and get him released just because the Mexican government wasn't happy about it. Well, I've got an official message for the Mexican government. If they don't like how we treat their nationals who come here illegally and then commit crimes, they need to work harder at trying to keep them on their side of the border. Alright, gonna take a quick break right now, and then we'll continue. Stay with us.
There is a place that you can hide under your bed at night. Stay out of sight. There is a tree that you can climb. Grab on to the vine. You don't have much time. And you can crawl, get away from it all, curl up in a ball. There is a door that you can shut, and with a little luck, it won't come unstuck.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back. Thanks for staying with us. Going to jump right on back into some of these other stories that popped up today that I think are worth talking about before we get to the main topic. One of the oddly that it gained so much traction, I should say, stories that I noticed floating around in the conservative areas was the fact that Quinnipiac conducted a new poll, which they're always doing polls over at the Quinnipiac University. This particular new poll, though, which was of interest for the politically minded, was the fact that Hillary Clinton was winning a clean sweep of the highest income slice of voters. Now, I highlighted the fact that Democrats' growing dominance among the nation's wealthy and well-connected. The new poll, which was released this past Tuesday, showed potential 2016 presidential candidate Hillary Clinton is backed by 45% of likely voters who earn more than $100,000. Also was quick to point out in the same poll that New Jersey Governor Chris Christie got 43% of the same group's vote. So statistically, that's actually a tie, because most of these polls have a plus or minus between 3 and 5%. And this percent still comes out less than a 2% difference. Now, Christie did edge Hillary 44 to 43% among middle-income voters who earn between $50,000 and $100,000, suggesting that the GOP's strongest support lies in the middle-class voters instead of the country club set. Now, among the high-income voters, Clinton beat Senator Rand Paul by 49% to 43%. She also beat Ted Cruz 54% to 36%, and beat former Florida Governor Jeb Bush 49% to 40%. In contrast, however, Bush and Paul lost the middle-class vote to Clinton by only 2 points. According to the poll of registered 813 Republicans and 803 registered Democrats, Cruz lost the middle-class votes by 6 points. In a question about overall favorability, Clinton got positive reviews from 53% of the wealthiest group, but only about 50% of the middle-class group. That 3-point class gap doubled when Quinnipiac counted unfavorable ratings. Only 40% of the upper-class group rated her negatively, while 46% of the middle-class group rated her negatively. At least this is according to the poll. Now, the Democrats' strong support among the wealthy classes with the established media's eagerness to portray the GOP as the party of the rich. That image was created, of course, before the late 1980s when Democrats under Bill Clinton traded their long-standing demand for tax increases to win more voters and donations from the wealthiest Americans. Barack Obama used that image to help get past former Massachusetts Governor Mitt Romney in 2012, and with the aid of donations from numerous billionaires, including Facebook's Mark Zuckerberg, Microsoft founder Bill Gates, Google's Larry Page and Sergey Brin, and investors Warren Buffett, and, of course, everyone's favorite creepy guy, George Soros. Those donations were rational. During Obama's tenure, nearly all economic gains have gone to the top 1%. While, of course, wages have stagnated for all other Americans. The GOP's loss of support among the wealthy has created a funding problem for the GOP, prompting party leaders to zigzag between the demands of elite donors and populist swing voters. The dynamic is highlighted by the immigration debate, where wealthy donors have allied themselves with progressives to press for an increased inflow of cheap foreign workers amid strong opposition from a worried middle class, working class, and independent voters. No mention of why they're worried. We can go into that. We could do a whole show on that. The wealthiest Democratic has been trending leftwards for decades, however, ever since President John Kennedy first won a narrow majority of professionals back in 1960. The high-income group includes risk-adverse executives at companies who are dependent on favorable government regulations. Many youthful rich from the post-industrial internet sector, and many post-grad professors who trust their fellow university-trained progressive peers to direct the nation's government, economy, and civic life. Now, many of the $100,000 plus voters, but not a majority, also support Democratic control of the Congress. 43% of the wealthiest group favored Democratic control of the Senate, while 49% favored the GOP. Middle-income voters, however, clearly favor GOP control by 50% to 41%. 49% of the $100,000 and up group favor GOP control of the House, while 44% Democratic control. Yet another question showed that wealthy GOP voters aren't as loyal to the local party candidates as were the wealthy Democratic voters, or even the middle class voters. The $100,000 plus club, they split evenly, 40% to 40%, over whether they would vote for their local Democratic or Republican candidates. Now that's a drop-off in support of roughly 9 points among GOP voters, but a drop-off of only 1 to 3 points among the wealthy Democrat partisans. Middle-class voters were relatively more willing to pull the lever for their local GOP candidate by 40% to 43%. But what does all this really mean? What is the big hubbub? Now, first of all, this is being put out there as a means of trying to, once again, puff up and make Hillary Clinton look like she is the viable candidate. But as all that is concerned, it is, of course, just media traffic. The real question is, does this poll mean anything? And in truth, it's way too early for a poll to mean anything, even when they do. And most of these polls are relatively meaningless, especially at this point anyway. Why, would you say? Well, it's simple. First of all, these polls are typically designed to elicit the response they're looking for. They're worded in a specific fashion, and this is nothing new. But it also shouldn't be surprising that the Country Club group would feel this way anyway. You're talking about the elitist, the people that consider themselves a cut above the rabble. These folks, on the one hand, are looking for, as the article mentioned, favorable governmental practices. They want laws and administrative policies put in place that would be helpful, and they fully expect that by making serious donations that they'll receive consideration when these policies are instituted. Then others are simply motivated strictly by snobbery. The bottom line is they feel like they should be set above, on a pedestal, so to speak. They want to consider themselves part of the new American aristocracy. And the only way to do that, of course, is if they allow the government to grab more power. The GOP currently is on the same track that the Democratic Party is on, just at a much slower rate. The populist ideology, the Tea Party mentality, that offends most of the Country Club set, regardless of whether they're Democrat or GOP. So, naturally, the more influence Tea Party ideology and populist ideology garners over the Republican Party, the less likely they are to support it. It's contrary to their worldview. So it's not surprising. In fact, the only thing that is surprising at all is the fact that they were willing to admit that any of the GOP candidates, even though it was just Chris Christie, managed to be within the margin of error to be considered a statistical tie. I think it also demonstrates the fact, quite honestly, that evidently Benghazi doesn't mean anything to rich people. Not real sure if there's anybody left that Benghazi means anything to, other than to a hardcore group of conservatives that are still seeking some semblance of justice. Ambassador Stevens, he doesn't mean anything to the Democrats. And speaking of Democrats, and women Democrats in particular, and we've already kind of mentioned Texas, I think this whole Wendy Davis thing is just really continuing to blow itself out of proportion. She's been caught red-handed lying. She turns around and denies that she was lying. In fact, delivered an open letter claiming, in fact, that everything that she had claimed was absolutely true. In fact, the quote from this open letter is, "Damn right, life story is true." Yeah. It's first I need to backtrack a little bit, because I do sometimes jump in. I understand most of the people that would be listening to the show probably have heard about this, ongoing as it is at the moment. But in the event that somebody out there hasn't, then please let me give you some background information on this story. There is a Democratic candidate in the state of Texas seeking the governorship by the name of Wendy Davis. Now, Miss Davis has painted herself as the prime example of a strong female trying to make her way through the world. She was a single mom, and she fought her way and worked her way through college and earned herself a degree. And she attended Texas Christian University, and then from there she was able to get into the Ivy League. I forget right off which university it was there, but excuse me, I need to clear my throat. And I'll come up with that here in a little bit. But as it turned out, the Dallas Morning News kind of started this little issue downhill for her, as many of the claims that she had made about her life story and her bio, she either embellished or left stuff out, or exaggerated, or flat out lied. See, Davis was responding to this Dallas Morning News article that was claiming that Davis left out key details of her widely touted life story. In particular, of exactly how much help she received during her rise from a trailer park dwelling single mother to a Harvard Law School graduate, to the likely Democratic nominee for Texas governor. See, when Davis had told her inspirational tale, she had typically mentioned that she was a single mom who was also raised by a single mom. She says that she entered community college and then attended Texas Christian University, financed it through a mix of scholarships and Pell Grants, and in the meantime, according to Davis's tellings, she married again, had a second child, and then graduated with honors from Harvard Law School back in 1993. Quoted as saying, "Mine is a story about a teenage single mother who struggled to keep her young family afloat. This is a story about a young woman who was given a precious opportunity to work her way up in the world. It's a story about resiliency and sacrifice and perseverance." It's a story, all right. In fact, it's completely blown up in her face by this point, but there was just questions being asked by the Morning Star at that point in time. But I'd like to point out right here, part of the liberal mentality kind of shines through in her little statement. She said that it's a story about a young woman who was given a precious opportunity. I take exception with that because last time I checked, opportunities such as Pell Grants and scholarships and work study are pretty well available to anybody that's willing to go to school and use them. I mean, there are some strings attached, but the opportunity wasn't given. It was there for the taking. Anybody can do this. You have to be willing to put in the work. So I take exception with that part of the statement, but she made it sound like, oh, it is so very hard to have an opportunity to better yourself. It's not. It's not. She started in a community college. You too can start at a community college if all else fails. You don't have to. There are opportunities to start at four-year institutions. They're out there. But, you see, more information came out about her inspirational story. Now, the Dallas Morning News, in its report on her bio, cast a little bit of doubt on the genesis of that precious opportunity. According to that particular report, Davis's second husband, former Fort Worth City Councilman Jeff Davis, had a big hand in helping pay for his wife's academic studies. Jeff Davis paid for Wendy Davis's final 2 years at Texas Christian University. He also cashed in his 401k to help pay for her studies at Harvard, at least according to the newspaper's reports. What's more, Wendy Davis filed for divorce the day after Jeff Davis finished paying off his wife's Harvard school loans back in 2003. Now, other details uncovered in the report might be embarrassing for Davis as well, who gained national attention after her infamous 11-hour filibuster back this past June, when she was going on in an effort against the ultimately successful Republican-backed bill banning abortions after 20 weeks, unless the mother's life is in danger. She took to the floor and filibustered for 11 hours because she thought that it should still be okay to have an abortion on demand at 20 weeks or later. This is relevant because, today having been the anniversary of Roe versus Wade, her big claim to fame, what has catapulted her to being the likely Democratic nominee, or at least she was before the scandal broke. Democrats typically tend to circle the wagons, and she'll probably survive this. So she may very well, most likely, be the Democratic nominee for the governorship of Texas. But remember, what catapulted her to the consciousness of Texas state Democrats was the fact that 20 weeks, no. There shouldn't be a set period of time in which abortion on demand should be allowed. Claiming that that's women's rights. What about the rights of the unborn child? It's a child by then. No matter when you think life begins, after 20 weeks, come on. At any rate, the big deal here, the controversy continues in so much as the first documents filed in the couple's divorce proceedings, Jeff Davis claimed that Wendy Davis had committed adultery Wendy Davis also relinquished custody of the couple's daughter and agreed to pay $1,200 in child support per month. She was paid child support. In other news reports that came out afterwards, she indicated that Davis wasn't strictly raised by a single mother either, despite her claims. In fact, in an interview last year, Davis's father, Jerry Russell, rejected the idea that his daughter's childhood was as despondent as she claimed. He has said that he was not present in the family home, but was present in his daughter's life. Wendy Davis had also claimed in 2012 that her mother had only a 6th grade education. The Davis campaign has had to correct that statement after the Associated Press reported that Davis's mother, Ginger Cornstubble, is that actually her name, Cornstubble? It's Stubble or Stubble? Either way, sorry, Ginger. It's a heck of a name. At any rate, the AP reported that Davis's mother made references to attending Muleshoe High School on her Facebook page. Muleshoe High School. Thought we had some doozies here in Tennessee. That's an interesting name for a high school, guys. At any rate, Davis also hasn't always avoided acknowledging her ex-husband's help. Quoted as saying that he gave me my adolescence. He gave me the opportunity to be a university student. In fact, Davis said that in a 1996 interview with the Fort Worth Star-Telegram during her unsuccessful campaign for the Fort Worth City Council. Now, Davis ran again in 1999 and was elected to the position. She was elected to the Texas State Senate back in 2008. Davis has blamed her likely Republican opponent, Texas Attorney General Greg Abbott, for what she sees as a political attack. You caught me in a lie. That's a political attack. The only thing Greg Abbott and his allies have proved with these desperate attacks is that they don't understand what it means to live a life like mine. A life like that is of so many people all across our state. That was also in Davis's open letter. But Wayne Slater, the Dallas Morning News reporter who wrote the story, says that he did not speak to any members of Abbott's camp for his article. Davis responded as response has deepened the controversy. Quote, I am proud of where I came from, and I am proud of what I've been able to achieve through hard work and perseverance. And I guarantee you that anyone who tries to say otherwise hasn't walked a day in my shoes. Davis said this in a statement shortly after the Dallas Morning News article was published. Abbott has been paralyzed since the age of 26. So a lot of people took her little statement about hasn't walked a day in my shoes as a direct crack on the fact that Abbott's paralyzed. Now, based on just reading it here, as snarky as Davis seems to be, it is entirely possible that she may have been taking a swipe, but by the same token, it is also just as possible that she was just trying to be dramatic and wasn't even thinking about it. So that might be a stretch. And I don't ask me why I'm willing to give her the benefit of the doubt on that, given the obvious issues she has with telling the truth. But regardless, there are more issues to be looked at, and more scrutiny has come since her denial. There are documents that show a Texas court ordered Wendy Davis to stay away from drugs and alcohol. I kid you not, a few years after Wendy Davis claimed in court that she had suffered damage to her mental health, a Texas court put Davis under a temporary restraining order prohibiting her from using drugs or alcohol within 24 hours of coming into contact with her children. Now, she's going to visit her children. Now, according to documents, Wendy Davis's own child requested her father be her custodian. Likewise, in filing his divorce against Wendy, her husband requested the court enter the temporary restraining order. The court, without an evidentiary hearing, did so. In fact, if you'd like to go to redstate.com, they have an article listed there that is titled "Documents Show Texas Court Ordered Wendy Davis Stay Away." And they have links on that article to the temporary restraining order. Now, the court ordered that Wendy Davis be immediately restrained from using illegal drugs or consuming alcohol within 24 hours before or during the period of possession of or access to the child. The court also ordered Wendy Davis to keep out of her residence anyone she was having intimate or dating relationships with while the children were present between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. Now, the Dallas Morning News reported that Davis's husband, who paid Davis's way through Harvard Law School by cashing in his 401k and taking out a loan, claimed that Davis committed adultery on him. Davis's husband got custody of the children, and the court ordered Wendy Davis to pay the child support. And we kind of touched on that already. $1,200 a month of child support. This is a big story because it keeps getting deeper. But it's also a big story because of one of those things that we like to touch on here. One of the main themes is the media bias. The media has attempted over and over again to protect Wendy. They've come up with excuses. They've come up with reasons why she's not really lying. Oh, don't blame Wendy. It's not her fault. Don't blame Wendy. She didn't know what she was doing. But, it's not just Wendy either. I mean, there's really a lot of Democrats that get that preferential treatment. Comes to mind, if you like your plan, you can keep your plan. Most of the mainstream media is still trying to protect Barack, saying, well, it wasn't really a lie. He just was telling you what he knew you needed to hear and what he thought was true, but he thought you understood that meant it had to be a good plan, or whatever the BS line is. And that's what that is, by the way. It's just BS. It's desperate. But, you can't blame Wendy Davis for the things Wendy Davis made up. You can't. Wendy Davis's gubernatorial campaign is crumbling around her right now because she's been caught red-handed, and the Texas media isn't going to let it go. Even if the national mainstream media wants to ignore this as just one more example of the way, politicians lie across the board. It happens. But it seems like there's much more occurrence with Democrats being caught red-handed and the media ignoring it. But here's the thing. Having a shot to national prominence for a failed filibuster protecting late-term abortions that most Texans and Americans abhor. We're talking late-term abortions that she was trying to maintain. Davis decided to take on Greg Abbott, who, according to most people, happens to be a shoo-in for governor, who had millions in his war chest before Davis had even begun to consider throwing her hat into the ring. And while Davis is heavily backed by the pro-abortion lobby, she seems to have forgotten the fact that the state that she's trying to represent is Texas. We're not talking about New York. We're not talking about California. We're not talking about Illinois. We're talking about Texas. She's been trying to run a campaign based on issues like gun control in a state that loves their guns. And, by the way, seems to be pretty fond of insulting the Texans that she wants to govern. That doesn't seem like a smart way to get votes. So it's no wonder that polls were looking bleak for her even before this came to light, that her bio was more fiction than fact. And unfortunately for the Davis, the race, which was never in her favor, doesn't seem to be looking up. Now, we've already talked about Dallas Morning Star News and their report, and it's been a very damaging expose on Davis, only made worse by her open letter. But, it revealed conclusively that her rags to riches self-made woman tale of a struggling single mother who put herself through law school and made it to the state legislature with nothing but hard work and ambition, it's almost complete fabrication. Davis was in fact a single mother for a few months. She did get her college degree and then attended Harvard Law School. Harvard Law School. But the reality is that she was 21 when she got divorced, not 19. And that she married a man, Jeff Davis, who paid for her to go to school and took care of the children she left behind while she went to Cambridge to fulfill her ambitious dreams. The day after her husband made the last payment, we already mentioned this, made the last payment on her student loan, she left him. Out the door. Gone. Boom. And he maintained custody of both children, including the child that her ex-husband had fathered. She said that it wasn't a good time for her. Motherhood is all about picking and choosing when you feel like raising your kids, after all. I mean, isn't it? I'm pretty sure I read that somewhere. Somebody pull up Wikipedia for me and look up motherhood. I'm pretty sure that's the definition. Picking and choosing when you feel like raising your kids. Right? At any rate, she also, as it turns out, isn't new to lying about her past. Davis also lied under oath in 2012 that she was 19 when she got divorced, not 21. Rather than taking the usual politician's route of fake apologies after being caught in a questionable scenario, because, she's a Democrat, we can't call it a lie. The media certainly won't. So rather than the, I'm so sorry, and we just made mistakes. No. Davis decided to completely advocate responsibility and to blame Greg Abbott. According to Wendy Davis, Greg Abbott is the one responsible, claiming that Wayne Slater, the reporter who broke the story, got the story from the Abbott camp. Davis went further on her Twitter account By the way, guys, Twitter, not a good idea to get on there when you are A, angry, B, drunk, C, out of your mind for some other reason. Stay away from the Twitter if you're not thinking clearly. But at any rate, Davis, on her Twitter account, was claiming that Abbott had sunk to a new low by attacking her family and her character, and called him out of touch with the struggles Texas women face. It's hard to tell which struggles she was referring to exactly. The struggle of ditching your kids in order to further your career? Deciding whether one should wait a day or a week before leaving their husband after using him for his money? Yes, these are truly the struggles of the Texas every woman. Slater himself clarified that he had no contact with the Abbott camp. But what if Abbott had been the one that leaked the story? Is Davis really going to blame Abbott for the lies that she chose to spread? I mean, unsurprisingly, the pseudo-feminist camp is already coming out in defense of Davis, despite the fact that she has been caught, not just in one, not just in two, but a series of blatant lies. For example, Taylene Allison claims that a gang of men in Texas are trying to burn State Senator Wendy Davis on a proverbial stake. Yes, the horrors of men not allowing a pathological liar to continue with her pathological lies. And then over at Pentagon, the idea is to just act as if it never happened. Davis has admitted that she misrepresented details about her background, but evidently, because she's a woman, no one is supposed to acknowledge or be bothered by that. Modern day feminism means never being held accountable, evidently. Perhaps the issue of exaggerating her background isn't much on the scale of weighty political scandals. I mean, it doesn't really elevate itself to the level of Benghazi or the IRS being used as a weapon to target conservative groups or Fast and Furious. But it certainly still is damaging to Davis, or it should be to any politician. She's been caught lying multiple times, just like Obama. And when caught, rather than owning up and apologizing, she's dodging blame and attacking her opponents, just like Obama. I mean, is there someone who's truly ready to be a governor that would not even take personal responsibility for a mistake that you've made? Davis's handling of the scandal shows how woefully unprepared she is for the national stage, no matter how much of a hero she is to the pro-abortion movement. And like it or not, she's just not what Texas needs. She's just not what women need. I was listening today to the Sarah Marie Brenner show. I don't mind plugging Sarah Marie. I like her a great deal. I've had her as a guest on the show before. And she was discussing some of this, and she actually made a statement very similar to something that I have said on a few occasions, and that is that feminism doesn't equal equality. Not anymore, at any rate. the feminist movement, I don't believe, was ever really about equality. But as so many other groups that cling to the left, you have a catchphrase. You've got to be for something. It has to be for the children, or it has to be for equality. And the whole idea of equality with these people has nothing to do with people actually being equal. It's not about equal rights. It's about special rights. Somehow they've been wronged, so they're entitled to some type of special treatment. It's very aggravating. But regardless, I mean, is it just me? Or has anybody else noticed that when a Democrat lies, at least as far as the media is concerned, that it's never an actual lie? I mean, when Dems get caught red-handed telling a lie, it's very, very rare for the media to actually call it a lie. I mean, you look at Obama's wonderful mantra of, if you like your plan. He still has diehard defenders out there trying to say that we just didn't understand what he meant by that. We were supposed to understand that he meant you can keep it as long as it was a good plan. Which, by the way, I don't know. I hope at least by now most of you have been over to the exchanges and at least looked at the plans. I have lost my insurance coverage because of Obamacare. Me and my family now do not have insurance the way I wanted it, and I refuse to sign up for it. I have made a pledge as a sign of social disobedience, I guess. I refuse. I'm not going to sign up for Obamacare. Tennessee does not have a state exchange, so if you're not a local listener, so that you understand, I would have to go to the marketplace. Have to go to healthcare.gov and buy at the national level. And there's no way I would put my information on this riddled site. But all this being put aside, you know, the big debacle this week, I mean, there's nothing. We could literally have a 3-hour show talking about this monumental tail dive that Wendy Davis has been in since this story first broke. From the story being written to the open letter to the denials. But still, here we have this Miss Davis. She's a Texas state senator. She's a gubernatorial candidate, and she is an absolute hero for these murderous abortion enthusiasts all across the country. And, you know, as it turns out, she said a bunch of stuff about her past that just isn't true. Well, now, she is a politician, and I think all of us, whether we should or not, we expect to be lied to by politicians. I don't think we should expect it. I think we should expect better than that. There are still some honest, conscientious people. Of course, you know, part of the problem here is we do tend to keep voting for politicians because it's typically only politicians that run for the offices. It would be great if we could just get regular, everyday people to go and serve. Not politicians. I don't want to vote for a politician anymore. But we can't really help it. So, at any rate, she's a politician and she's a Democrat who was championing one of the left's most treasured policy goals, abortion on demand, regardless of circumstance. So, with that in mind, she has to be protected. She is a torchbearer for the death cult of abortionists across the country. She must be protected by the liberal mainstream media. even see it in the local headlines there. I mean, the headlines when the Dallas Morning News broke the story, as Wendy Davis touts life story in race for governor, key facts blurred. That was the headline. Another headline that you would have seen: Wendy Davis admits to fuzzy facts in bio. That was from the Washington Post. Fuzzy facts. Another headline: how much will Wendy Davis's bio gaffe matter? That was in the AP. Now, whatever you do, just don't call it a lie. But then, again, like I said, this is a woman who actually tried to call herself pro-life. And her boosters in the media ignored it. She's there. She's their darling. She's their hero. She's a torchbearer. And they're going to do whatever they deem necessary to help her get elected. Thankfully, at least I'm hopeful. It really seems like it's a completely lost cause at this point. But, they'll report the facts, kind of. And they certainly will report facts when they have no other choice. But not without massaging them a bit and, dismissing some of them as being unimportant. I don't know, does that remind you of anybody else, the way the media's treated them? Barack Obama. I mean, Davis, she's went out there and she's blaming her opponent, or at least the opponent campaign. We know that, of course, we don't always control those that work for us in our campaigns. She's blaming them for the story. But between the headlines, the harshest expose, still, the headline read that the facts were blurry. So whether or not it's blurry or fuzzy or just a gaffe, the real question is, why the crap can't our media be held to a standard where they step up and they say, this candidate lied about who they were? Shock Jock in the chat room has mentioned adequately, and very good point, that the feminist agenda is to make men inferior, born from liberal hate. And absolutely correct there. The feminist agenda has been about trying to convince women that they don't need men. And again, this is part... The feminists themselves have been brainwashed into thinking that in the first place as part of a more eugenicist idea that's part of their population controls ideology. Shock Jock also mentioned that it's funny, but Chris Christie is being degraded. It's a witch hunt. Many people have lost health care even for signing it. And, also a good point. So, thanks for being in the chat room again today, guys. Chris Top also in the chat room, as was earlier. I'm not sure if it still is, but Sunnyville FM was in there as well. So, appreciate you guys being there and listening tonight. Spent a little more time on this Wendy Davis thing than I wanted to, sectional-wise. Wanted to get to some other stuff, but, I just... There's the depth of this is so crazy. It's just infuriating, and again, it demonstrates all these little pet peeves that I like to focus on the show, so I had a hard time not spending a little too much time on it. She's made the wisecrack that these people think that she was cracking on the fact that her opponent is paralyzed. he's obviously never walked a day in my shoes. Now, again, I'll give her the benefit of the doubt on that, because maybe she was just trying to use the euphemism. I mean, we've all done it. Walk a mile in my shoes, blah, blah, blah. Maybe she wasn't thinking about the fact. But from everything I've seen and read, she certainly is snarky enough that it's possible that she was trying to throw an insult out there. And again, the party, the Democrats, of inclusiveness and caring for the downtrodden and the disabled and the minorities. Yet she's going to be the one to throw stones at the fact that he's paralyzed? I don't know. I read the statement, and I think it's possible both ways. I know folks close to this campaign think that it was intentional and it was meant to be hurtful. It's pretty petty. But what I do know that is painfully obvious is this woman has told this story to the point that somewhere along the line she's convinced herself that it's true. Like a lot of people, she has exaggerated her credentials. She is a politician, in every sense of the word. Worse than that, she is an honest-to-goodness liberal. And she would be far better suited if she was to move to California or to New York or to Illinois, someplace where they embrace the ideology of killing millions of children every year. Kind of ironic that part of the excuses being used for wanting to go into Syria was children were being killed. And yet the Democrats go out of their way to protect Planned Parenthood that has killed more children this year than have died in the entirety of the current Syrian civil war. Just something to keep in mind. Going to take a quick break, and then when we get back, we'll shift gears into another story, and then we will get to tonight's main topic. Going to discuss Tennessee's effort to physically make the NSA leave the state. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Idle days and listless nights. of the world.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back. Thanks for staying with us. Going to cover a couple of more minor stories, although minor is really dependent on your point of view, I suppose, before we get to the main topic. But I wanted to go ahead and remind everybody that the music you hear during the breaks here are provided by the service Magnatune. These are all independent artists, and by utilizing Magnatune, making sure that the licensing is taken care of, that everything's completely podcast safe. So if you're a podcaster too and you're looking for independent artists, which I like the idea of helping out these folks that don't have the backing of a record label, they're getting their cut, they're getting some royalties, and I don't have to worry about whether or not somebody's going to pop up and sue me or tell me that I owe royalties, because these are covered. At any rate, also I'd like to remind everybody that this coming Sunday at the Blog Talk version of Tap Into the Truth, joining me in the first hour for an entire hour, Michael Conley, the director of the United States Justice Foundation, will be on with us, and we'll talk a little bit about the foundation, what their primary projects are for the upcoming year, and we'll talk about focusing on veterans issues first off the bat, as they have actually already filed a couple of lawsuits trying to slow up the federal government and their attack on our veterans. One that's really just continuing to get worse and worse. In fact, over there I do a segment called Outrage of the Week, and for a while the Outrage of the Week has been the treatment of our veterans, both in the reduction of their pension plans and how this omnibus bill was passed in the dead of night with little or no opposition. It got through the House, it got through the Senate, it's been signed into law, and it left in place this reduction. I've said it before, I'll say it a million times again. There are two groups of people in this country that should never have to worry about promises that have been made to them by our government. One, our seniors, and the other is our military, either currently active or our veterans. These people should not have to worry about our government coming back and breaking their word. These are the folks that should be getting taken care of. It's an outrage to me, and I welcome the opportunity to talk with Mr. Conley. He'll be on for an hour, so please, if you're interested in hearing that, check us out. Won't be taking callers in that first hour, but in the second hour I will be taking callers, and would love comments about the interview, and we'll kind of go from there. Also, we'll cover some other news of the day, some of the stuff that you'll hear through the week over here, end up discussing again over there. So not a lot of repetitiveness, but if you're listening now, you might hear something again there. One of the topics I did want to get into, and let's go ahead and get into it before I ramble a little too long, is the fact that most of you probably remember the LAPD's epic struggle to capture, which they eventually killed, Christopher Dorner. But what a lot of people haven't been keeping track of is the fact that there was a path of devastation that was left in the wake of this pursuit. In fact, the Los Angeles Police Department officers mistook two Latino women for the suspect and fired over 100 rounds at them. Then Torrance officer Brian McGee thought he saw the suspect's vehicle and rammed into it at full speed, nearly killing the innocent driver, a David Perdue, who happened to be a white man, by the way. And McGee also fired 3 shots at Perdue. Well, the L.A. County District Attorney, Jackie Lacey, has decided not to press charges against McGee, since his error was a, quote, reasonable mistake. Now, I'm not really certain how a white guy driving a vehicle getting slammed into at full speed and shot at 3 times qualifies as a reasonable mistake. I understand these officers were panicked. This guy had proven himself to be dangerous, and you didn't want to give this guy an opportunity to take one of you out. But the cops during this pursuit did a lot of damage. Now, the LAPD police chief, Charlie Beck, attributed the misunderstandings to the incredible tension felt during the manhunt for ex-cop and cop killer Christopher Donner. But Purdue's lawyers have said that the explanation should not acquit negligent police who cause serious injury to innocent people. And, in this particular case, I tend to agree with Mr. Purdue's lawyer. Being anxious and afraid doesn't justify attempting to execute a man on his way to going surfing. That's what Purdue was on his way to do, by the way. Now, according to multiple sources, the fact that Donner had made death threats against law enforcement officers contributed to the heightened state of alarm on the part of the Torrance police and the LAPD. McGee made several unbelievable mistakes when he assumed that Purdue's vehicle was actually Donner's. For one thing, the color of the vehicle didn't even match. Still, McGee decided to ram Purdue's truck, leaving him with serious injuries that prevented him from working. And still prevent him from working. So, they're working the disability thing. They're going after the maximum amount of civil damages that they can get. There's no question here. But Purdue, who was on his way to go surfing, he looked nothing at all like Donner. Now, Dorner supposedly, and I know there's some questions about whether or not he did, but supposedly he took his own life during the manhunt. Now, I wonder, though, what kind of a message does it really send in the DA's decision not to punish any of the officers involved in the 2 mistakes? I mean, the lesson from the DA's decision in Los Angeles, as well as the failure to administer any significant professional punishment, is that when a cop goes down, we suspend the Bill of Rights until the killer is apprehended. Is that it? Is that what we're facing? Is that what we're looking at now? Is it okay to say, oh no, these guys are going to kill cops. We're going to just ignore policies, procedures, and public safety and just go around willy-nilly and ram into people and shoot at people and blah, blah, blah. And guess what? There's no repercussions. To me, this goes beyond the pale of what is or should be acceptable. I have on a multitude of occasions expressed my gratitude for the job that police officers do, and I know that despite all the terrible stories we hear, and unfortunately we're forced to focus on a lot of these mistakes, I think the overwhelming majority of police officers are great people and are good cops and are honestly trying to do the best job that they can at serving the public. I really do. And that's also part of why I think it is more than necessary to point out when somebody is wearing a uniform, carrying a badge, that really has no business doing it. Somebody who's going to panic and start slamming into vehicles that are the wrong color, so they don't actually even match the description, and then still fire shots. This is somebody... Yeah, I understand people make mistakes, but that endangered public safety every bit as much as anything that Dorner did. So, no punishment at all? I mean, shouldn't there be something? Shouldn't there be, I don't know, suspension from the force for a few years? Shouldn't there be criminal negligence, criminal endangerment charges? And, if you're going to give him probation on that because of the extenuating circumstances, then fine. But he should still have to go through the system, shouldn't he? I mean, being a police officer doesn't make you above the law. Had this been a random citizen that intentionally rammed into this car, whether he fired any shots at him or not, would this random citizen not have been charged? Chances are that they would already be in jail. So, what message does this send? I'm not at all happy with it. And I think that there should be something. I'm not saying that I believe that he should be thrown under the jail or life in prison or what have you. But I do think that it's completely ridiculous that this guy is only getting the slight slap on the wrist. And the other two officers that shot at the two Latino women, there's still not much follow-up on that. There's civil stuff pending. No final decision on anything criminal yet. And chances are it'll be about the same as this guy. So, yeah, I hate attacking police. But there are obviously some people that should not be police. You should not be opening fire in a panic. You're trained not to do that. I know you are. Police officers around here that supposedly don't get the same high quality, high caliber LAPD training are trained not to panic, not to do this, not to do that. And again, until you're in the situation, you don't know what you're going to do. You hope the training kicks in and you hope you do things by the book. But I know for a fact that most of the officers that I know personally have been in hot situations, and they have managed to conduct themselves in a professional manner the way you would expect a public servant, with the idea of protecting the public first and foremost. That's how they would behave. So, there you go, for what that's worth. Another quick story I wanted to get into. This is kind of a carryover from Martin Luther King Jr. Day. MLK Day always brings out the best, and it seems like there's absolutely been just a slew of racially based comments that have taken place since then. We were kind of already headed on the topic anyway after everybody's favorite corner for the Seattle Seahawks went on his little rant, and Twitter went alive, and now somehow it's being insinuated that the word thug is the new code for the N-word. For the folks that are tweeting that, asking it like a question or saying it like it's a fact, no, thug is actually a code word for thug. That's not really the story I want to get into, but I do want to go ahead and make this statement. What the guy did was some trash talking. He was still hyped up. He still had the adrenaline going. And he had just freaking won a game that's going to put his team in the Super Bowl. Should he have said the things he said? Should he said it the way he said it? Now that he's had time to calm down, I'm sure he would love to take it back. But it was just trash talking, and he didn't say anything that really comes outside the realm of athletics. And unless you've been an athlete, maybe you don't understand trash talking. You can be a trash talker and still be a good sport. I mean, it sounds kind of funny, but if you're involved in sports and you've participated and you've gotten involved with some trash talking, then you know that there's a certain amount of fun and there's a certain amount of element to that, and it's about projecting your will onto an opponent. You have to kind of get in that same mindset, and no matter what level the sport you compete at, there is a certain level of trash talking that goes around with almost any men's and even a lot of women's sports as far as that's concerned. So I did think it was kind of crazy. I was watching the game, and I did think it was kind of nuts that he went off like that on national TV. But for it to have caused such a stir, and the fact that people are still talking about it even now, come on, guys. And they want to make it a racial thing, too? Sheesh. But the story I wanted to get to, and I'll go ahead and get to that now, forgive my ramblings, involves Arizona State University. In fact, the administration is kind of freaking out over what they deemed an offensive MLK Day party. Now, it seems that angry administrators at Arizona State University are pursuing punitive measures against a particular fraternity that held a mocking Martin Luther King Jr. Day themed party. But a free speech group is trying to push back, saying that the students have a First Amendment right to host events that cause offense. Now, ordinarily, I would tend to question these First Amendment right groups, because I think the university does have the right to set policy, code of conduct on campus. Now, I do believe that, but there's some discussion as to what extent they're allowed to do that on a public university. So therein lies the rub. If we were talking about a private institution, say Vanderbilt, for example, if you're in the local listening area, you're familiar with Vanderbilt University out in Nashville. They are a private university. So unquestionably, anything that goes on campus, the college itself and the administration has full authority to control code of conduct and to punish as they see fit what goes on there. But evidently there's a difference, legally speaking, for public universities. Freedom of speech is protected differently there. Now, the Tau Kappa Epsilon fraternity held an event on MLK Day called a Black Party. Participants dressed up in a stereotypical black clothing, mostly basketball jerseys, and according to pictures and different images that were released from the party, they did this, and they even drank out of watermelon cups. The party prompted the university to respond to universal criticism from other students and faculty who found the event to be in extremely bad taste. And I got to tell you, they're right. It is. One student was quoted as saying, "I think this represents the ignorance that still exists today." That was Frank Hogan, a senior at Arizona State, and he also noted in his statement that the event was especially offensive given that it was the day of celebration for minorities and equal rights enthusiasts. We kind of touched on last show the fact that according to a certain Dartmouth professor, MLK Day actually is just a tool of the far-right imperialists. So, obviously the folks at Arizona State aren't quite as enlightened as the Dartmouth crowd. But at any rate, the administrators are actually going to go several steps further. They immediately suspended the fraternity, and they are investigating the party and may discipline individual students. Or at least according to the local news reports, that's what's going on. The university will not tolerate this kind of behavior, according to a press release from Arizona State University. The press release also made clear that the university would take action against everyone involved in planning the party. That would put ASU in violation of the First Amendment, however. ASU should keep in mind that students have a constitutional right to host such events, however distasteful they may be. This, according to Robert Shilby, Vice President of the Foundation for Individual Rights in Education. He went on to say, quote, "At public colleges, the First Amendment prohibits punishments based solely on the subjective offensiveness of student expression." Now, Shelby also said that those who took offense at the party should voice their concerns rather than censor the offenders. Parties with controversial themes pop up on campuses every year. The right to easy for me to say. The right to response to speech we don't like is more speech, not censorship or punishment. FIRE keeps track of America's universities, respect for free speech principles. Most campuses violate the Constitution by enforcing illegal speech codes that prohibit free expression, according to a recent FIRE report. Now, I don't know if this actually constitutes a violation of the Constitution. Like I said, there does seem to be some legal question about whether or not the difference in being public university as opposed to private university comes into play. But what's more asinine here is the fact that somebody wants to make a big deal about this. Now, the students in question did a dumb thing. They are not the first college-age kids to do something stupid, nor will they be the last. Not giving the students a pass on this by any means. But let's be clear here. The only reason that the Arizona State University administration is so worked up over this is because of their ultra-left brains are still embarrassed by the fight that the state of Arizona put up in recognizing MLK Day in the first place. As most of you will recall, they were the last state to recognize the federal holiday, and it wasn't until after several legal battles that they eventually did. Now, these college professors and administrators, they are desperate to prove that they are not a bunch of, quote, that they are not, quote, a bunch of racists like most of the state. And that is how they see the state that they live and work in. They are still trying to fight this image that they're racist and they hate blacks and other minorities. And I think that that's not a fair place to be coming from. I don't really think these kids were intentionally trying to be hurtful. They just were terribly insensitive. The whole thing was stupid. Hopefully they'll learn from it, and as they get older and wiser, this kind of crap won't happen again. But as we mentioned already, there are other parties with equally or even more offensive themes that take place on college campuses all the time, both at Arizona State and all the other campuses across the country, with little or no punishment at all. And in fact, if you're mocking certain groups, Christians and conservatives in particular, you're actually hailed as a hero. My advice on this one, have the public conversations. Let's talk about it. Show that the students behaved like asses, because they did. This was very asinine behavior. But then, let's move on. Because there's nothing else to this. It was just a stupid idea for a party. And probably was more about wanting to emulate a different culture than it was about trying to make fun of it. Was it appropriate? Was it smart? No. But like I said, let's have those public conversations and then let's move on. Wanted to also give out a quick mention. Actually started the broadcast. It was still Wednesday. It's being after midnight now. Technically it's Thursday, but as of Wednesday, the big March for Life that took place in D.C. was going on, and I wanted to touch on that because, here's the deal. Snow was absolutely pounding in Washington, D.C. It hit the entire area Tuesday, but the annual March for Life was scheduled to go on, and did happen in Wednesday. It went on without a hitch. Some of the biggest numbers they've had ever. And while Wednesday's forecast didn't include snow, it did include temperatures that were from the lower 20s to as low as the single digits. And it was windy to boot, so you had wind chill factors that, well, it was cold. Still, they had people show up, and they weren't just showing up, they were enthusiastic to march. They were ready for this big pro-life event scheduled on the anniversary of Roe versus Wade. Huge numbers. This was the 41st year of the anniversary of Roe versus Wade, and the decision is still controversial. The decision is still easily changeable, because in the decision itself, it stated that the court was siding on an issue of privacy because there was yet no legal definition of when the civil rights protections to the life of the child could kick in. That all Congress would have to do is pass a law stating when legal protections could begin. In fact, there has been a bill, Rand Paul has been pushing it, going since last year, trying to make its way through the Senate and the House, that is designed specifically for the purpose of establishing life at conception. And if that law was to be passed, then abortion on demand would instantly go away. Roe versus Wade would still be valid and could stand. It wouldn't change anything, because Roe v. Wade stated the simple fix was there. So I just wanted to mention the fact, big crowds, enthusiastic, mostly women. I feel like somehow men aren't supposed to talk about abortion. It's a women's issue. But I tend to think that the murder of millions of innocent children every year is a humanitarian issue. It's not a privacy issue. It's not a health issue. Abortion should not be a form of birth control. there are occasions, there are circumstances, there are situations where it may be the appropriate thing. But abortion on demand as a form of birth control should not be encouraged, it should not be legal, and it should not be welcomed in anyone's thought process. That's it. That's all I've got to say about that, at least for tonight. I'm going to take another quick break, and then when we come back, we will hit the main topic of the day, and then we will call it a night. So stay with us. I'll be right back. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back. Thanks for staying with us. I want to go ahead and get into this topic tonight. As it turns out, filed today, there is a new bill that is currently being called the Tennessee Fourth Amendment Protection Act that has been placed in the beginning stages to becoming law. Now, currently there are 8 states that have introduced legislation to keep the NSA out of their borders. But Tennessee's newly introduced legislation packs the strongest punch yet. This bill, as I already mentioned, Tennessee Fourth Amendment Protection Act, is being sponsored by State Senator Stacey-Campfield, certainly no stranger to controversy, and State Representative Andy-Holt. Both of them are the Senate and House sponsors. The bill was drafted and lobbied for by the 10th Amendment Center, which of course is a national think tank which seeks to impede unconstitutional federal laws, regulations, and entities on the state level. Stacey-Campfield was quoted as saying, "We have an out-of-control federal agency spying on pretty much everybody in the world. I don't think that the state of Tennessee should be helping the NSA violate the Constitution and the basic privacy rights of its citizens. And we don't have to." He also went on to say that this bill may not stop the NSA, but it will darn sure stop Tennessee from participating in unjustified and illegal activities. Now, Campfield's comments hold strong warrant. The NSA has been operating directly underneath the nose of many Tennesseans without them even knowing. A long-standing secretive NSA computing facility just happens to be located in the secret city, kind of appropriate, the Oak Ridge, Tennessee. Now, according to the NSA researcher James Bamford, the NSA runs most data it gathers, from code breaking to word captures, through computers at its facility in Oak Ridge. The Tennessee Fourth Amendment Protection Act, Senate Bill 1849, will impede the NSA by refusing material support, participation, or assistance to any federal agency which claims the power, or with any federal law, rule, regulation, or order which purports to authorize the collection of electronic data or metadata of any person pursuant to any action not based on a warrant that particularly describes the person, place, and thing to be searched and seized. Simple, everyday, straightforward language. If you don't have reason to believe this person is a criminal and you don't have a warrant saying that you can search this, we're not going to let you do it. You not use facilities here. You can't use resources here. Go somewhere else. Excuse me. Sorry about that. Now, from a practical standpoint, the legislation covers 4 major areas. Number 1, it prohibits state and local agencies from providing any material support to the NSA within their jurisdiction. That includes barring government-owned utilities from providing water and electricity. It also makes information gathering without a warrant by the NSA and shared with law enforcement inadmissible in state court. I don't see the NSA going through state courts very often. They tend to think they would want to take anything and everything through federal court because they are a federal entity. But on those occasions where what they found is appropriate to go to state court, guess what? Can't do it. That evidence, not admissible. It also blocks public universities from serving as NSA research facilities or recruiting grounds. NSA, get out of the University of Tennessee. Move along. You're not allowed. Disincentivizes corporations attempting to fill needs not met in the absence of state cooperation. Now, basically, that just means you're going to lose incentives you currently have, whether that be tax breaks or utility incentives or whatever, if you cooperate with the NSA after we're not going to. Now, the 10th Amendment Center National Communications Director Mike Maharry provided the following statement. When Senator Ward in Arizona announced a few weeks back that she planned to introduce the Fourth Amendment Protection Act, it was a novelty. People had had this attitude like, oh, that's cute, but it will never amount to anything. Today, Tennessee makes the 8th state considering action to refuse cooperation with the NSA, including 2 states with physical facilities within their borders. And mark my words, more are coming. Big ones. James Madison said several states refusing to cooperate with officers of the Union would create obstructions the federal government would not be willing to encounter. As more states get involved in this campaign, it will create obstructions. This is not symbolic. We intend to make the NSA stop violating the Constitution. Now, the Multi-Program Research Facility, MRF for short, sits discreetly on the east campus of the Oak Ridge National Laboratory. Inside this top-secret facility, the NSA researchers work to build high-productivity computers. The goal, of course, is to make machines fast enough to crack encryption. Numerous sources report that the MRF will work in tandem with the Data Storage Center in Bluffdale, Utah. The superfast computers in Oak Ridge could conceivably break the encryption on who knows how much data that's going to be stored in Utah, making its contents accessible to the NSA. This includes data of Americans vacuumed up by the spy agency. A partnership between the University of Tennessee runs the Oak Ridge National Laboratory, and the UT Battelle's contract ends in 2015, but the DOE has already declared its intent and started the process to extend that contract. That process will take some time, and the proposed legislation could potentially stop it. Now, many possible co-sponsors of the act have come forward to show their interest, including State Representative Courtney Rogers, Representative Tillman Goins, and Representative Jeremy Fashion. State Representative Joe Carr signed on as a co-sponsor to the act this morning. Carr is, of course, a Tea Party favorite candidate currently running a campaign to try to primary U.S. Senator Lamar Alexander. And, oh yes, by the way, he has been a guest on the Blog Talk version of Tap Into the Truth. So if you'd like to slide over to Blog Talk at some point and hear what Joe had to say about his campaign to try and primary Lamar Alexander, you can find that in the archives, as well as a couple of visits from Danny Page and Miss Brenda Leonard as well, who are also in that race to try and unseat Lamar in the Republican primary. The hour that we spent with Mr. Carr was probably the most interesting one. Is we had a caller call in, and he got rather abusive with him while I was off air talking to another caller. So he got a little rude with him, and there was some back and forth, and, well, it got a little heated, and unfortunately, Mr. Carr took exception with me letting it go on, not understanding that I actually was away from the status where I wasn't hearing what was going on. The caller had called before. I know who the caller was. He's a regular over at another one of the shows, Southern Sense, and he'd called my show a couple of times. So, and ordinarily, he'll ask questions, but he's usually pretty polite, and he usually makes his point and moves on. So I was really surprised that they got so heated. But ultimately, Mr. Carr kind of still holds me responsible, which, I to a degree I am. My show, I'm the host. I was running the screening board, so it falls on me. Because I had the guy on before, I felt comfortable with letting them talk, and I knew he would talk for a while, so it was close to time for the interview to be over, and I wanted to let the other caller know that the hour was almost up. So I was conversing off air with the other caller, and, well, long story short, Joe Carr is a quality candidate and has a very good chance of unseating Lamar Alexander if the other candidates don't end up splitting the beat Lamar vote. I have a lot of respect for State Representative Carr, and I find it interesting that he's signed on as a co-sponsor of this bill, probably just to raise his standing in the Tea Party community, as it were. But regardless, it's worthwhile. But here's the thing. This bill could essentially force the NSA out of Oak Ridge, out of the state of Tennessee altogether. At least as far as them having facilities on the ground, using them to spy on American citizens and anybody else for that matter. I keep thinking back to Mr. Hussein Obama's speech this past week, going on about his proposed fixes for the overreach of the NSA, and in it he never actually made any promises. In fact, if you missed it, Jon Stewart kind of did a really nice job of discussing exactly what transpired with that. You can find those video clips on YouTube or at several conservative websites if you wanted to look around for them. But the point being that really nothing changed, and the only new thing that he really suggested is that instead of the government storing them, because again, he's already been told this type of legislation is on its way. States are going to make it impossible for the NSA to operate within their borders as long as they're continuing to behave in this fashion. So his idea here was to let private companies hold the data. It'll still be there for the government's disposal. And he even said as much that there were 3 or 4 caveats put in place. We'll do this unless we don't want to. And that's really what it came down to. If we can't restore states' rights and get back to the point where states are nullifying these federal objectives, then we're going to be in so much trouble. I mean, there's a huge movement towards trying to repeal the 17th Amendment, which is essentially where people started voting for their senators instead of state legislatures selecting their senators. What most Americans no longer understand is that the House of Representatives was meant to be the voice of the people. The Senate was meant to be the voice of the states. States' rights and the individual sovereignty of the people were meant to be equal voices when it came to the federal government. Do not ignore the will of the states. The states have power and authority under the Constitution. Is Tennessee actually physically kicking the NSA out? Well, they can't physically kick out the agents or prevent them from doing their work. But they can do exactly what this bill that they're hoping to make law is setting out to do, and that is severely hamper the NSA's ability to break the law. And anytime the NSA is spying on an American citizen, unless there is a direct person-to-person contact between that American citizen and acts of terrorism that are being focused from outside of the country in here, then it is a violation of the Constitution. There is no two ways about it. Barack made his convoluted speech talking about how intelligence had saved the day from the very humble beginnings of the nation. All of which is an invalid point in the discussion, because in each and every one of the examples he mentioned, this intelligence was gathered from the enemy. Already a declared enemy. That's not what the NSA is doing. The NSA is spying on everybody. Everybody. Why? Because they can. The technology is there. And even if they are or aren't looking at specifics, the fact that they're collecting and saving all of this metadata so they can come back later is a violation of the Constitution. Period. Plain and simple. And it must be ended immediately. So kudos to the Tennessee State Legislature. Kudos to Stacey-Campfield, one of the more colorful and controversial members of the Tennessee State government. Stacey-Campfield also, by the way, has introduced a bill trying to protect Christmas in the state. designed to protect people in schools from dealing with lawsuits involving anything Christmassy. Seems that to find folks at Freedom from Religion, and if you're a regular listener to the show, you've heard me talk about the Freedom from Religion Foundation on more than one occasion. They tend to stick their nose in to a lot of places. Anyway, Freedom from Religion has been making some threats again to some schools in the state of Tennessee in regards to the fact that there were holiday trees in some of the schools just prior to Christmas. Now, the school did the politically correct thing and referred to them as holiday trees instead of Christmas trees. But that still is enough to draw the ire of Freedom from Religion, because obviously, regardless of what you're calling them, it was a symbol of a religious nature. So now the point is, they want to make it completely safe for you to be able to say Merry Christmas to somebody and not have to worry about being sued. Sadly, this type of legislation has become necessary. So kudos again to Mr. Campfield for that. He has in the past taken a great deal of heat, though. In case you're wondering why the name sounds familiar, he made national headlines last year over a bill that was ironically called Don't Say Gay, where he was trying to limit the amount of exposure, if you'll forgive the terminology, of homosexual lifestyle and homosexual sexual activities as part of state-approved sex education classes. Now, the law was not intended to ban information or failure to acknowledge homosexual activity, but it was meant to limit how much discussion was involved there so as to prevent the possibility of confusion or the possibility of promotion of a lifestyle considered still to be outside of the norm. And you know why it's considered to be outside of the norm? Because less than 2% of the American population happen to be homosexual. Now, doesn't mean they're not entitled to rights and should be shunned or whatever. Don't take me out of context. Don't try and pretend like I'm saying something I'm not. But that sexual orientation, not a factor in most people's lives. But there is very little reason for school-age children that have not yet begun to have sexual urges to be told about a wide variety of things that, in all honesty, they shouldn't have to be thinking about yet. Senator Campfield took a great deal of heat over that, but he stood firm, he stood tall, and he fought for it, and I give kudos to him. A lot of folks around here think he's a bigot. They don't like the media perception of him, but there's a reason why he keeps getting elected, and that is because the folks that know him best are the folks in his district. They keep re-electing him because he represents them, and they are not haters. They are not prejudicial. They are not anti-gay. But they know Mr. Campfield well enough to know that the media is painting a picture because he's dangerous to their narrative. Now, kicking the NSA out, making it so that no government agency within the state, whether it be a state agency or a county agency or a municipality agency, make sure that none of them are legally allowed to provide material support for illegal activities. That's a good thing. That's a law I hope gets passed. I'm afraid that Governor Haslam may not be willing to sign that into law. But the way the law works here in Tennessee, Governor Haslam doesn't necessarily have to sign it. Things can become law without his signature. And as long as he doesn't veto it, that'll be good enough for me. It will still become law in that circumstance. I don't know how much of a fight you're going to have, because I think this is pretty much a across-the-board issue where both Republicans and Democrats have a problem with the NSA spying on American citizens without cause. So I don't think there'll be much of a problem getting this passed. I certainly hope not. I know there will still be somebody that lobbies, and the feds will get in the pockets and therefore in the minds of some of the more party-oriented Democrats, probably from the western part of the state, if I had to venture a guess, although it's possible they could round up someone from Chattanooga. And they'll fight it. But I think in the end that there's not going to be much of a fight. And I think this law is a good law. I think it's a good idea, and I think more states need to follow suit. Because what's going to happen is if they are forced to remove the facilities like the one that's in Oak Ridge, well, what are they going to do? They're going to move it somewhere else. So, friends and neighbors, Georgia, Alabama, Kentucky, Virginia, North Carolina, West Virginia, Arkansas, Mississippi. Did I leave Kentucky out? Didn't mean to. You guys need to get on the ball too, so that when they do move, they got to move a pretty fair distance. Because ultimately, every state, every individual citizen, every elected politician at every state of the game should be working to stop the unconstitutional activities of the NSA. The NSA is supposed to spy on our enemies. That's why they were created. That's what their charter says. They don't have authority. They don't have jurisdiction. They don't have permission to deviate from that charter and start spying on American citizens. Now, you may question my use of the word permission, but permission for such a deviation must come from the true sovereigns of the nation. And that is the American citizen. We are governed by our own consent. That is the nature of the Constitution that was given to us. That is the nature of our democratically representative, not democracy, republic. We have a democratically representative republic. That's what we have. And it was given to us through the work of the framers in an attempt to have a government that would preserve our God-given rights for freedom, for our right to pursue happiness, our right to have property. These are natural rights. These are God-given. The Constitution doesn't give us these rights. It is designed to limit a government from taking those rights from us. The Constitution is designed to keep our government in check and focused on its job to protect our rights instead of trying to slowly usurp them. If you want to check out any more information about it, all you would have to do about it, I'm referring to the bill in question here, or if you want to check out more information about the multi-program research facility that's part of the Oak Ridge National Laboratory, you can check out the Oak Ridge National Laboratory. You can run a Google search You also can pull up more information based on the Tennessee 4th Amendment Protection Act, or you can simply look up Senate Bill 1849. I think these things are worth taking a look at, and after checking them out, forward this to your elected officials in other states. Get the ball rolling. Be active. This is a call to action, ladies and gentlemen, because stopping the NSA, stopping the office of the president from overstepping its bounds, stopping Congress from failing to do their constitutionally assigned duties, that falls onto us, we the people. And that happens through a lot of direct confrontation. Not violence, but phone calls, emails, letters, lawsuits when necessary, but also through the pursuit of state and local politics, instituting policies that prevent the federal government from overstepping their bounds within your own jurisdictions. You can affect that. You have a state senator, you have a state representative, they will listen to just a few dozen phone calls, will change their voting pattern. Because they get concerned that something like that's picking up momentum, they'll take action. And they'll start working on a coalition, and if enough of you call enough of them, that's how change happens. Because one thing will get the attention of a politician more than who's donating the most to the campaign. And that is when a large enough block of voters express their feelings. This, as a midterm election year, you have a lot of state representatives and a lot of state senators who they're going to be paying extra attention. The same could be said for some of the federal offices that are up in this midterm as well. So make your voice heard. Follow Tennessee's lead, at least on this issue. And let's kick the NSA out, at least until they start behaving the way they're supposed to. That's going to have to be it for tonight. Thanks everybody for listening. Thanks everybody for being in the chat room as well. Much appreciation this evening. Again, I want to give a special thanks to 102.2 Sunnyvale FM. Thanks to Chris Top. Thanks to Shock Jock Radio. In again. He was in last Monday. Was an integral part of the show. I want to go ahead and thank DJ Danny Phantom for popping in for a little while. I don't know if he's still in there or not. I hadn't said anything in a while. Hope you guys are still there and still listening. But at either rate, I appreciate you being here for whatever point in time you were. Hope you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. And also a reminder, if you're checking us out in podcast form, if you're not looking here at Spreaker, you can also find us at Stitcher.com. You can find us at TuneIn.com. You can find us over at iTunes. And of course, when I stop being lazy, I will go ahead and physically move this over here to tapintothetruth.com, and you can find it on the past broadcast page. And while you're at it, go ahead and check out tapintothetruth.com. Check out the homepage. Down near the bottom of the homepage, you can send me direct messages. Love to get feedback. And near the top of the page, you can easily find links to like the Tap Into the Truth Facebook page and to follow Tap Into the Truth on Twitter. That's going to be it for tonight, folks. So, whatever you guys are doing for the rest of the week, good luck to you. Hope it is a good week for you. And remember, don't take my word for it, but definitely don't take their word for it. Take a little time, do your own research, use your brain, and always prepared to put in at least a little bit of effort if you really want to tap into the truth. That's it. Good night, everybody. Thanks for listening. See you again soon.
I've been watching, begging from the front door, like lightning striking near twice before. We were so young, so we didn't really know how it feels to really have to let go. We went throwbacks, laughing while I relapsed. Well, these drinks are going down too fast. We were in touch, but it was not enough. We were sober, but she had me love drunk. So this is goodbye. I hope all the stars they shine wherever you will go after tonight. So this is our one life. Try my best to make it right. I promise you that I will always wanna fight. Always wanna fight. Don't you forget everything that we had. All the good was better till it went bad. You know me better than anything, so I bet you saw this coming. We were laughing, thinking about old times, like our first kiss when I finally called you mine. We were like, wait, everything is gonna change. Hope when I come back you know my name. I don't think I can say all I need to say. With the time left, counting down by the days, it would go by. I don't know how time flies. It's a heartbreak,